Don't be absent-minded. Towards the conclusion of his lecture on the wonderful sight to be seen in this world, the famous traveler said, "There are some spectacles that one never forgets." At this point, a tiny old lady in the back row stood up and timidly inquired, "Oh my, can't you tell me where I could get a pair? I'm always forgetting mine." Are you continually plagued by misplacing certain items? Do you waste precious time searching for your glasses or for the pencil which is usually perched behind your ear? Are you the type that always screaming, "But I just had it in my hand a moment ago"? Do you always hide your valuable trinkets so well that you yourself can't find them? Ladies, are you constantly late for a date because you simply can't locate your favorite lipstick? And men, does your wife rant and scream while you laboriously search for that misplaced cufflink? If the answer to any of these questions is yes, run, don't walk. You to your nearest bookstore. If this were a radio or television commercial, it might sound something like that. Don't you think? But seriously, have I hit the bullseye with some of the above questions? I'm almost certain that I have, because very few of us are fortunate enough not to be absent-minded at times. Many people make the mistake of confusing absent-mindedness with poor memory. Actually, I feel that they should be considered two entirely different things. People with excellent memories can also be absent-minded. You've all heard of absent-minded professor stories. Well, be assured that in order to be a professor, you must have a good memory. To begin with, the hundreds of gags about the absent-minded professor who's wind their wives, kiss the cat good night, and put out the clock may be true for all I know, but still don't signify that they have poor memories. I believe that you can cure absent-mindedness with just a little effort and with the tips contained in this chapter. However, please do not feel that you can do it by just reading it. You have to make it your business to use the information supplied here. Then and only then will it happen. Will it help you? I assume that many people will read through a book of this type, never try to use the information given, and then complain that this will never help them. That, of course, will be true if you just read through this book without attempting to apply the systems. Many adults always claim they are too old to learn. I believe they mean that they are too lazy to learn. No one is too old. E.L. Thorndike, an authority on adult education, said, "Age is no handicap to learning a new trade, profession, or anything you want to do at any time of life." The italics in this quote are mine. If you really want to learn, you can. So don't use age as an excuse. Actually, absent-mindedness is nothing more than an inattention. If you paid attention to where you put your glasses, naturally you would know where they were when you needed them. The American College Dictionary gives preoccupied as one of the definitions of absent-mindedness, and just about hits the nail. And that just about hits the nail on the head. The little things that we do continually, like putting down things, are just not important enough to occupy our minds. So we become absent-minded. It stands to reason that if you put things away without thinking or mechanically, you'll forget where they are because you never remember it in the first place. When you leave your whole house, you usually worry about whether you lock your door or not. Simply, you usually worry about whether you locked your door or not, simply because you locked it unconsciously without giving it a thought. So I solved your problem. To avoid absent-mindedness, think that you're doing. I know you're thinking. I knew that. If I were able to think each time I put something away or locked a door, I wouldn't be absent-minded. Okay, then, why not use conscious association to help you remember trivial things? You can, and it's easy to do. For example, one thing that is annoying to all of us is forgetting to mail letters. You either forget to take them when you leave your house, or if you do take them, they remain in your pocket for days. If you want to be sure that you take the letter with you when you leave the house, do this. First, decide what it is that you do or see at the very last moment upon leaving your house. I personally see the doorknob of my front door because I check it to see if the door is locked. That is the last thing I do. So I make a ridiculous association between doorknob and letter. When I leave my house the next morning, I'll check the doorknob. Once I think of doorknob, I'll recall my ridiculous association and remember that I must take the letter. The last thing you do before you leave your house may be entirely different. You may kiss your wife or husband goodbye. Will associate the kiss with the letter. Make sure that your associations are ridiculous or illogical. Now, how can you be sure to mail the letter? One way is now, how can you be sure to mail the letter? One way is to keep it in your hand until you drop it into the mailbox. If you'd rather keep it in your pocket, make an association between person and letter. Make an association between the person the letter is going to and the mailbox. You might see him sitting on top of the mailbox, etc. If you do not know the person well enough to picture, use a substitute word as you've already learned. If the letter were going to the telephone company, you would associate telephone to mailbox and so on. When you see a mailbox in the street, it will remind you of mail. The letter it will remind you to mail the letter. After all that, I hope you remember to put the stamp on the envelope. This idea can be used for all the little things you want to remember to do. If you keep forgetting your umbrella at the office, just associate umbrella to the last thing you do upon leaving office. If your wife calls and tells you to be sure to buy some eggs you on your way home, associate eggs with, say, your front door. This will act as a final reminder instead of waiting to be reminded of your home. Associate eggs to grocery store. Then you see a grocery store. It will remind you to go in and buy some eggs. Of course, all these are theoretical examples. You would know just what to associate to what in your own particular case. Now we come to a real petty annoyance of absent-mindedness, such as putting things down and forgetting where they are. Well, the method applied to this is exactly the same. You have to make an association between the object and its location. For instance, if the phone rings and as you reach for it, you put your pencil behind your ear, make a fast mental picture between ear and pencil. When you're through with the phone and you think of when you're through with the phone and you think of pencil, you will know it's behind your ear. The same thing goes for any small item or small errand. If you're in the habit of putting things down any place, get into the habit of making an association to remind you where it is. One of the questions usually asked at this point is, fine, but how am I going to remember to make these associations for all petty things? There's only one answer to this question. Use some willpower at first and be sure that you do make the association when you see the result. I'm sure you'll manage to keep it up, and before you know it, you will have acquired the habit. There's no doubt, by the way, that this system must cure absent-mindedness. The reason is obvious. The eye cannot see if the mind is absent, and your mind is absent when you put things away mechanically, and the very idea of making an association makes you think of what you're doing for at least a fraction of a second, and that's all that's necessary. If you make an association between key and your door as you lock the door, you are no longer doing it mechanically. You are thinking of it. Therefore, later on, when you wonder if you locked the door, you'll know you did. When setting the alarm on your clock, make an association between clock and hand, or between clock and anything for that matter. It doesn't matter. The important thing is that you are thinking of it for a moment, and because you did think of it for a moment, you won't have to get out of bed to check if the alarm is set. I say that the association doesn't matter, and it doesn't. As a matter of fact, if you closed your eyes, saw yourself turning off your iron as you were doing it, you wouldn't have to worry about whether it was on or off. While trying to enjoy a movie, closing the eye, picturing the action is just as good as the association. It serves the same purpose, that of forcing you to think of what you're doing at the moment. That's all there is to it. But I can't stress strongly enough the necessity of using what you've just learned. Please don't read it out of your head and say, it's a great idea, and then forget it. Put out the bit of effort. At first, you will be glad you did it. And you will be glad you did it. Put out a bit of effort at first, and you will be glad you did it. Captain of the ship talking to sailor. Don't you ever say the back of the ship again. That's the stern of the ship. And that's port side. That's standard. That's the crow's nest. That's the gig. That's the forecastle, etc. If you ever say back of the ship again, I'll throw you out of that little round hole over there. Just as absent-mindedness is often mistaken for poor memory, so is absent-mindedness often blamed for mental blocks. Again, I don't think that one has anything to do with the other. Having something familiar on the tip of your tongue and not being able to remember it is not absent-mindedness. What it is and why it happens, I don't know. But unfortunately, it does happen to me as well as to you. There isn't much I can do to help you avoid mental blocks. There isn't any system I know of that can stop them. However, I can tell you that when it does happen, try to think of events associated with the name or event you're trying to recall. If it's the name of a familiar person that you can't think of, try to picture the last time you saw that person, where it was, what you are doing, and who else was present at the time. The mind must work in its own devious way. More often than not, just thinking around the fact you want will make it pop into your mind. If this doesn't help, the next best thing is to forget about it, stop thinking about it completely for a while, and the odds are it will come to you when you least expect it. That's about all the help I can give you when it comes to mental blocks. Try my suggestions the next time it happens to you. You may be surprised at how helpful they are.